Welcome to Uncompromised. It's the podcast where we talk about regenerative agriculture, the economics of farming, and how we can uncompromise the industry and the food that we eat. Today, we're going to get into what happened on the farm this past week, and then we're going to talk about what regenerative agriculture kind of means, and then we're going to get into how we use it on our farm in particular. But before we do, consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel. We're on a mission to restore the soil on our Ohio Christmas tree farm, and we're doing this by transitioning to fully regenerative farming practices. We're also bringing chestnuts back to Ohio, and we're developing a business model that will one day allow our farm to become profitable in an era where the economics of farming are questionable at best. Does any of this sound possible? Do you want to find out? Because I think if you do, you're in the right place. So get subscribed, learn with us, and be a part of this new mission and this new farming blueprint that's designed for the next generation of farmers in America. So today, we skipped a week, so going back 2 weeks to the last episode, we'll kind of recap what we've done on this, on the farm, kind of what's changed since the last time we talked. And I also forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Kyle, that's Kevin, and this is my dad, Scott. So I know that one big thing was the coffee hut. So we started that not this past Wednesday, but the Wednesday before that. And we opened that up for the first time this season. And that kind of marks the kickoff of our second year for that coffee hut. So I haven't been involved in that yet because I was sick last Saturday. And yeah, so how has that been going for you guys?
First week was better than this week. But it's nice to get out and reconnect with some of the customers that we had last season, and then meeting new faces, talking about regenerative farming, because ultimately that was the purpose in the coffee hut, was advertising for the farm, talking about regenerative agriculture, and just interacting with our local community. So in that aspect, it's always successful.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. So what about in terms of customers? Has it not been super busy? Have you had any busy days yet?
Well, last week was busier than this week.
Yeah.
Saturday was one of our best days that we've had. We were at the YMCA here in Englewood, and I think they had volleyball going on inside. So we had a lot of younger parents come out, and some repeat customers, and then we had some that were new. And of course, like Kevin was saying, that's exactly what this is all about, is trying to educate, the local public on what regenerative agriculture is. And so it's a great way for us to have that conversation with people. So yeah, I thought Saturday was a really good day in particular. We had our first on Monday. We had the first time that I can remember all of last year. I don't remember this ever happening, but we had nobody. We had 0 sales, and that happens, and it's going to happen. And unfortunately, we're still new. People are not, I think, as familiar with the fact that we're out there. But that's how it went. Today was not bad, for a Friday. So it went pretty good today. We are trying a couple different places. So hopefully we can get that nailed down so that we can spread ourselves out a little bit. We're trying to stay, of course, here in Englewood, Union, West Milton, that area, because that's where the farm is. But we'll see where that goes.
So I've told you a few times about the gentleman who couldn't drink store-bought milk and everything like that, and I talked him into trying low-heat pasteurized milk. Today we were talking again, and it was the first time that he connected the dots that the coffee hut was a part of Advent Christmas Tree Farm. And he's been coming here for years and just didn't connect those dots. And he was like, it makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, I think on the surface, it is hard to make that connection, to see how they're related to one another, because it seems like, and even when we were deciding to go with that, how foreign an idea, at least for me, how foreign an idea that was. But of course, Kyle and his persuasive abilities was able to help us see the bigger picture.
I think there was a couple of people that while we were parked out there during the Christmas season and we were selling coffee, I still don't think, I think there were a few people that still didn't connect the dots that the hut was part of the farm. I think they thought that we were hired by the farm to come out and serve coffee.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's kind of a tricky thing to keep people informed about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was one thing that that happened over the course of the past couple of weeks. And of course, this past week, we finally, we had ordered a log splitter. It's called Super Splitter, so it's made by a company in the Northeast, and so that arrived. That was a good thing, and so Kevin and I got an opportunity to try it out.
Yeah.
And so
First time using a kinetic log splitter.
Yep, yep,
Which very different.
right.
So what's the difference between a kinetic and a hydraulic?
So, I mean, do you want to explain it?
Yeah, I mean, the principle for a kinetic splitter is you've got a very heavy flywheel, and you get that flywheel rotating, and then that provides kinetic energy that allows a piston, for lack of a better term, it's just a metal piece. It builds up kinetic energy, and then that very quickly hits the piece of wood and pushes it up against a wedge. And what's interesting about it is its speed. It's so much faster than a hydraulic system, which has hydraulic pistons and hydraulic fluid, and it's much slower at pushing that piston. And through hydraulic pressure, that's how that works. It pushes the log through, again, a wedge, and then it retracts. But it's much slower. So, and it's a lot more complicated in terms of the machinery.
So the trade-off is kind of speed versus power. So the hydraulic system has a little bit more power. It can push through a bigger log. Am I right about that?
Well,
but it just does it slower?
I think the larger the flywheel you have, the more kinetic energy that's built up. And so I think there's an argument to say that they're probably pretty comparable. And the one that we have two 90-pound flywheels on them. So it builds up a very good amount of kinetic energy. And we were splitting
some knotty stuff.
And large knotty stuff.
Large stuff.
And it was plowing through it. But just like a hydraulic splitter, I used to use a 42-ton hydraulic splitter, and I would go through that same kind of thing with that knotty wood, and it'll bind right up.
Yeah.
And we did. We had that problem with a couple times with a kinetic splitter. But in terms of comparison, I'd say they're pretty equal in terms of power.
Yeah. The big thing is, like you were saying, it's the cycle time.
Yeah.
It's how long it takes for that push rod to get back to set so you can start your next split.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, with the kinetic one, it's pretty much as soon as the log's there, you're ready. Or that piece that you're splitting.
Oh, yeah.
It's just instant. There's no wait time.
Well, two of us were working it, and the guy on the splitter was sweating. I mean,
constant.
Because you could keep up. He could barely. I'd go and I'd pick up a log and I'd put it on there, and he's splitting it just that quick. And then by the time I go and get another log and get it up there, he's done. And so it may have multiple splits on it. But yeah, it can really keep up with you. And so from a time perspective, that was really helpful for us.
What are you doing after you split it? Do you push it into the trailer, or do you have to throw it in there? You just chuck it?
We kind of throw it into the trailer. We've got a big 18-foot long trailer that has 4-foot sides on it. And so we just filled that thing up, and we did max it out. That thing was loaded.
Loaded it in about 4 hours.
Yeah. So I'd say we might have gotten 4 cords.
I'd say about 4 cords, yeah.
About 4 cords of wood,
which
cut in about 4 hours, and it took another 5 or so, 6 hours to stack it. So we just finished that literally 15 minutes ago. We just came in from stacking wood. But yeah, that's what we did. So we've got, of course, there were 5 piles out there, large piles of wood where we had cleared one section of our property for the regenerative part of our farm. And so we're trying to knock down those piles right now. So we got 1 of 5 done.
the smallest one.
Yeah, that's the smallest one. So Yeah.
It was,
Yeah, but that was the big thing. And then mowing. So our way of controlling weeds around our Christmas trees is through mechanical mowing, as you guys well know. We don't use any herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, fertilizers, anything like that on our trees. Again, part of this idea of regenerative agriculture and taking care of the soil, which we'll get to here in just a few moments, but we really started in earnest over the past several weeks to mow. And so Trudy was out earlier today doing what we call an in and out mow, where we're actually going in between the trees with we've got three John Deere F735. They're diesel 60-inch commercial mowers, and so they have an offset to them that allow us to go in and out of the trees, so that we can get between the trees. We can get the row, of course, but between the trees we can get that the weeds there too. Takes a lot longer. It's a much slower process, but with the dandelions up now and they've gone to seed, it looks just awful out there. So we're trying to get that under control. So that was the other big thing that we've been doing this week.
So in terms of timing, when you start mowing and by the time you've worked all the fields and you get to the very end, do you have to, is there any do you get any break between that, or do you immediately have to start back where you started?
Ordinarily, this time of year, once the grass starts growing, because of the rains and that kind of thing, as soon as we finish, and it takes, if you put about 4 hours a day into mowing, and you go through the whole 15,000 trees, it takes us 6 days. So we finish up usually on a Saturday, start on a Monday, finish up on a Saturday, don't work on Sunday, start right back into it on Monday. What's been surprising is this has been one of the driest springs that I can remember for us right here. I know just 20 miles north of us, they've been getting rain every single night.
yeah.
We haven't had any.
Yeah.
Other than very light sprinkles, but we had none. So in fact, many of our seedlings haven't even received water. They've been in the ground now for a month.
Yeah.
Hadn't received any water.
So that's the other thing that we've done. We've watered chestnut trees.
Yeah, so we've been watering our chestnut trees, but a lot of people say, well, why don't you put in an irrigation system of some sort? But there's lots of issues with doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit concerning. I was going to ask about the lack of
yeah.
rain recently and the seedlings and stuff.
Well, the 400, the last, we planted 2,100 trees, or 2,880 is actually what we planted, that were Turkish fir and concolor and Canadian fir. Those were really good and healthy. Then we got 400 concolor fir that we put in 2 weeks ago. Those concolor fir came in super dry, and they're plugs. And so we put them in the ground, and those, almost every one of them are dead.
You can tell already.
Oh, they're dead. Oh yeah,
Dead.
yeah, they're brown dead. Yeah, yeah, and just if you don't get rain immediately on those seedlings, the chances of losing them are extremely high. And I'm very concerned with the other ones. But
So how do you mitigate that? Do you just have to order that much more next spring?
yeah, well, I mean, if that's the case, then we just lost a growing season, an entire growing season. We're praying for rain. But as farmers, we all know that you're absolutely dependent on the weather. And I mean, there was a time I used to get really, uptight about that, and that's long since gone. Trust in the Lord and know that He'll take care of it. And we just deal with it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's what you got.
You've had like a drought before.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we had one year, 2010 to 2011. We planted 1,900 seedlings and lost 1,810 of them. So 90 seedlings survived that year.
So basically all of them.
Yeah. So basically all of them.
Yeah. Field
Yeah.
5.
That was field 5. We had to replant the next year, lost an entire growing season, and yeah. And then that second year we had another drought. But fortunately, timing wise, it came later. So the seedlings were able to get at least fairly well established before that came in.
Real quick, if you're a coffee drinker and you're looking for a solid brand that supports regenerative farmers, then check out 7 Weeks Coffee. It's what we use in our Coffee and Chestnut Hut because they're faith-based, they have a great mission, and their Dominican blend is sourced from regenerative farms. They do not sponsor us, but because we use them in our Coffee and Chestnut Hut, we have an affiliate link that we can share with you guys. So if you use our discount code ADVENT, you'll get 10% off of your order, or you can also use the link that's in the description below. It's a great way for you to support our channel and our farm, and you get a discount on great coffee, and we get a kickback, so it's a win-win. The topic for today is regenerative agriculture, and I want to kind of define that as best as I can. And when I say define it, I mean like how we define it, and then how we apply that to the farm. And there's a lot of context, I think, that needs to be understood before I go too deep into it, but there's a big comparison between regenerative agriculture and conventional monocrop industrial farming. And there are two techniques for farming, and one of them, the conventional one, is a lot more prevalent in this country. It's 98.5% of all agriculture in America is conventionally farmed.
Oh, I didn't realize that was the percentage. Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
And so it's essentially growing one single crop on a plot of land, and it's often corn or soy around here, and you're using tillage and often synthetic chemicals and fertilizers, and then in some cases there's also confined animal feedlots that are involved in conventional farming. And so you're kind of just controlling the land and growing a single monocrop, and it's really good for mass scale and large quantities of food. However, it also poses a few risks and problems, and those are often mitigated with chemicals and synthetic fertilizers and things like that. So this form of farming is fairly new also. It started, from what I understand, after World War II, so in the it kind of accelerated in the late 40s, because they had a bunch of leftover fertilizers, particularly nitrogen, and there was some chemicals like DDT that they repurposed into pesticides. And over time, as they did this, these chemical companies grew larger and larger and kind of became what is known as big ag today. So I'm kind of expanding over between post-World War II all the way to present day, and how that industry has kind of grown into what it is today. And along the way, there was also a lot of new legislation that came on a federal level that incorporated new policies and favored large-scale production so that you could have a more complex and long-distant market to not just reach the entire country, but also for imports and exporting trades across countries and things like that. So it's a very complex industry, and it's grown to be the most prevalent form of agriculture in the country. You tracking with that so far?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're talking.
that makes sense.
Yeah, talking get bigger, get out.
Yeah.
Type thing. There's a bunch to go in there. You also have GMOs and whatnot.
Right.
What I find interesting about that is, because I grew up, and I think all of us grew up not on a farm.
Right.
So, when my wife Trudy and I started this farm, we did not think of any other way of approaching it other than the standard way that Christmas tree farmers have been doing it for years. And a Christmas tree is a monoculture too. Yeah. It's just like corn or soybean. It's the thing that we're growing on our farm. So we adopted the practices of the industry at the time, and still it's very prevalent of, where you fertilize twice a year, you're using chemicals to control. And in fact, I remember in 2009, went to a course in Pennsylvania as part of the Christmas Tree Association where they taught chemical mowing. And it's prevalent today too. It's called chemical mowing. And it's just low dosage of chemicals, herbicides in particular, that slow the growth of weeds, don't kill them. But that allows you to control it a little bit and those kinds of things. So, I mean, we bought into that whole paradigm and culture and didn't even question it because we didn't realize
Right.
there are other ways of doing these kinds of things. So my generation, which was post World War II, but it was a natural thing to flow right into the commercial way of doing agriculture. And we're not here, I don't think we're here to poo-poo that or to talk down about that process. That's the way America has done it for years and years, and there's plenty of goodness in what that is offering. We're just looking at it from a different perspective now as we get into this whole idea of regenerative agriculture.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's also, I mean, we don't do any kind of cash crop really that's edible right now.
Yeah.
So eventually we'll have the chestnuts and maybe fruit trees and stuff like that, but we're not soybean, we're not corn, we're not doing any of that. So it's a lot of what we talk about when we talk about traditional farming and everything, row crop and everything. That's typically what we use because it is the most prevalent thing. Once we start talking about cattle and everything like that, we'll talk about feedlots and the industrial method that is used, which is very, very different than the regenerative method.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So I'm glad you said that because the concern I had even going into this is that I don't want to talk down on conventional farming and then prop up regenerative agriculture. I'm just kind of explaining this from my perspective as a new farmer and even our whole perspective as farmers that have only have experience on our farm. Because like you said, Christmas trees are a monoculture, and then we are transitioning from those traditional ways into a new regenerative way of doing things. And there are benefits and there are pros and cons to both methods, which I think we'll get into a little bit, which is something to consider. And there's certainly arguments both ways, but this is just from our perspective.
Yeah, so you've talked about the commercial, industrial method of farming. So that was one method. So the second mething you mentioned is this whole idea of regenerative agriculture.
Right. And also one other thing is any negative connotations that I have against what I'm calling conventional farming is really geared towards the big ag industrial complex and not towards the actual practice of farming itself, because conventional farming has really been around for a long time. I mean, even pre-World War II, it wasn't technically the same, but it did involve a lot of monocrops. There was some diversity there, and there was some tillage there as well. So it's kind of a blend between the two, pre-World War II, and none of this is really new in that regard. So I think one difference is that regenerative agriculture is also not a one-size-fits-all, because what works on our farm, the formula that works here is probably really only going to work for us for the most part, and a similar farm down the street might have completely different issues that need to be fixed in a very unique way when it comes to regenerative farming, because that's kind of the benefit and the negative side of it is that it's something you have to cater. You're creating your own natural ecosystem, and when things go wrong that's unique to that system that you've built, you kind of have to come up with not a one-size-fits-all solution to that problem.
But why don't we define it
I was
a
gonna
little
say,
bit?
so
Yeah, so that
the
everybody
context
kind of has an understanding of what regenerative agriculture is all about.
So the word regenerative means having the ability to renew, restore, regrow, or improve something. And that's just the word regenerative, and it applies to not, it applies to anything. The practice of regenerative agriculture is mimicking natural perennial ecosystems to produce food through polycultures, no-till methods, and rotational livestock grazing that builds soil, sequesters carbon, and restores biodiversity. It honors animal and natural behaviors without chemical confinement, monocultures, or yielding nutrient-dense food while regenerating the land. So there's a lot of buzzwords in that definition that should probably get broken down as well. So the first one being, it mimics a natural perennial ecosystem. So what is a perennial ecosystem? Perennial meaning that it's reoccurring. It's a self-sustaining natural system with perennial plants like trees, shrubs, vines, things like that, that will live and regrow for many years without needing to be replanted.
Exactly, and that's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah, is not having to replant year after year. Let me ask you, where did you get that definition? What's your source for that?
That is a combination, I think, of multiple definitions that I found.
Okay. Okay.
So I put bits and pieces and kind of just formed that one.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause
That
I
one
wanna properly,
definition.
make sure we cite anything that we pull.
Part of it is from the Restoration Agriculture book.
Yeah, that was the one by Mark Shepard,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah. Good. Okay.
So another word in there was polycultures. So poly meaning multiple.
Yep.
Multiple plant species that are working together in the same area, mimicking natural ecosystems instead of a single monocrop, single crop monocultures. So polycultures just meaning you want to have basically as much diversity in that ecosystem that you're creating that all kind of works together
Right.
and serves a function. And also, so sequestering carbon just literally means taking the carbon that's in the atmosphere and you're pulling that into the soil. You're doing that through the plants and the roots and all the life that's in the soil. It extracts the carbon from the atmosphere and puts it into the soil because that's an essential part of that system inside of that living soil.
And that's a really important point because the carbon nitrogen balance in the soil is absolutely critical. And what I find amazing when I look out, and especially right now, what are our farmers doing in the local area? They're out there tilling, breaking up the soil, releasing the carbon, which is just the opposite of what really needs to happen in order for that soil ecosystem to actually prosper and be the best that it can be.
There's a lot of problems when you disturb that soil. So all that carbon is getting released, and you're also drying it out and killing the life that's in the soil, the mycorrhizal fungi and all the bacteria and fungus and that's in there. All that kind of dies off. And also you're creating optimal conditions for soil erosion too, which is a side effect a very prevalent side effect that we're seeing now in this day and age after all these years of conventional farming. Soil erosion is a real big problem.
Yeah.
And tilling and exposing that soil and just leaving it there ends up creating dust, and it literally just erodes away.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember talking to my brother Kenny when we moved on this farm. It had been a corn soybean farm for many years, and 30 or more years, probably much longer than that. And you could see when I would go out into the field, you can see where the areas that were actually used for corn and soybean and the areas that weren't, because they were a good 6 inches lower than the surrounding service roads and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was explaining to him what that was. That's exactly what you were saying. It's the erosion of the topsoil.
There's a field, if you drive to my house in West Milton, there's a field, if you're on that main street, on the left-hand side, that I look at it every time I drive by, and the field, all the land is one level, and then the field itself is probably 12 feet below the maybe like 10 feet below the road level and everything else that's surrounding it. And I don't know, I'm assuming that's erosion, but I don't know. Maybe it really is just a dip, but the whole field itself is has been lowered like 10 feet.
Yeah. Wow,
It's interesting though.
Yeah.
So, well, one of the other things that is a side effect of tillage and everything like that is creating the clay pan, that hard surface area.
Yeah, plow pan called plow pan.
Yep. So you have now created a hardened barrier where water can't infiltrate really past that. So we talk about having droughts and everything like that when a large part of it is how much water can your land retain? So effective rainfall.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you don't have any life in your soil, really. You don't have air pockets. You don't have anywhere for that water to go. So all that water just runs off and takes all that topsoil with it and ends up in our rivers and streams, along with all the chemicals that you also just sprayed on.
Yeah.
So there's many compounding factors there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, so we've got that part of the definition.
Mm-hmm. I have a shorter definition here too that doesn't use all those buzzwords. I'll read it real quick. Regenerative agriculture is farming that copies nature. Let me start over. Regenerative agriculture is farming that copies nature. You're growing many different plants together like a wild forest, keeping soil undisturbed, and you're moving animals around to graze naturally. So the land gets healthier and the food isn't stripped of nutrients. That's courtesy of AI.
Yeah. It's a courtesy of AI. So when we talk about regenerative agriculture, and I'm asking this question of you guys just to get your thoughts on this, are we really talking about regenerating the soil, which then feeds the plants, which then allows the cattle and the chickens and the eggs, I mean, animals to grow on it, that kind of thing? Is that how you kind of think about it when we say regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, I think of it as we're creating a system, a self-sufficient system that works together. And in order for that system to work, you have to basically get your foundation in order. And that, I think the soil is the biggest part of that foundation, because the soil is kind of the key element to kick-starting the system and to keeping it functional over many, many years.
Yeah.
So therefore, a big focus of regenerative agriculture ends up being the soil.
Right. Yeah, it's not the only thing, but like you said, and I agree with that. I think a foundation, it is the core foundation. And without that in place, then you really don't have regenerative agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I would say we're putting a few key things into practice and getting out of the way and letting nature do what it does best.
Yeah.
I mean, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, all of the water cycle, everything like that, it functions on its own. We don't need to do anything.
Yeah, so let me expand on that a little bit, because I think that's a really critical point in this whole thing. Because we've mentioned many times we don't use herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers and things like that. And the question is, why not? Well, part of it is what you were just saying, and that is, if your trees, and I'm just thinking trees right now, but we can apply this to chestnuts and those kind of things. If they need to have chemicals such as fertilizers for them to grow, they become dependent on that kind of thing. Or if we need to apply chemicals to get rid of bugs,
Right,
or weeds, that kind of thing, well, they're very adaptive. And so they change, which means you have to apply different or stronger amounts of herbicides or pesticides to continue to kill off those weeds and pests. And I've seen that on this farm where we were using one product, and pretty soon the weeds, herbicide, the weeds just weren't responding to it anymore. And so you had to go to a different product or increase the dosage of what you were putting down. And of course, all of that is leaching right into our water system.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that's always been alarming to me, but that I think is pointing to the fact that your ecosystem is going to adapt to whatever it is that we're doing. And so I want, and that was kind of the objective as we were moving into chestnuts and our Christmas trees, is for them to not be dependent on any of the artificial stuff that we're putting on, and they make it on their own. And if they can't, then they're cold.
Yeah.
And what that does is that prospers those that are adapting to the environment in a natural way.
Right. So I forget which book it was, but he talked about the stun method, the sheer total utter neglect.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Can't remember what it was. Was that Gabe Brown?
I think it was Gabe Brown. The ultimate goal is to be able to practice that fully.
Yeah.
To an I guess not even fully, because you're still managing. Like once we put livestock and everything, you're still managing, and we still have involvement there. But I think like for the chestnuts especially, the ultimate goal is to just let them do their thing, and whichever ones survive.
Right. And we just replace them, and
yeah,
and we go from there. We're not trying to nurture. And same thing with the animals. When we put the animals out there, a lot of people think we're crazy not to include a veterinarian process.
right.
Well, I mean, when you think through that, it's the same application, the same logic applies. But what about the principles? There are some basic principles around regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
I want to see if I can get these by memory.
Yeah, but I want to say real quick that I think these principles help create that system that we were talking about that allows you to then use the stun method, the sheer total utter neglect, whenever you do have certain problems that arise. Because if you remove any of these principles or start taking away from the system will break down, it doesn't become self-sufficient. And then when you do use the stun method, you might actually start to create new and additional problems for yourself because the system isn't healthy.
Right. Good point.
And I think when you take away things like those chemicals from the process, one thing that I really love about regenerative agriculture is that nature being God has a solution to everything in nature, I guess. So when you have a problem, you can rely, and you have a healthy system in place, you can then rely on it taking care of itself. Even if things might actually get worse before they get better, in the case of certain pest infestations.
Yep.
I know that this was something I wanted to talk about, was when there's an initial restoration phase, which we're currently going through, when you're transitioning from different farming techniques into regenerative, and you have to make sure that your soil is established and you have everything in place to get the system started. And as you do that, where was I going with that?
Well, I think with the principles that we're trying to understand is, in order to get that soil to where it is self-sufficient, it's created its own ecosystem, there are some guideposts that we can use.
Yeah, and so during that restoration phase in particular, a lot of people, we haven't had this problem, thankfully, I don't think so, but a lot of people run into the issue of pest infestations during that restoration phase because the whole thing is out of balance. And so the first thing that you notice, or the quickest thing that arises, tends to be a certain infestation of, and it might even be like a weed infestation or a pest infestation. And if you're following these 5 principles correctly, usually that will get worse, and then before it gets better, and then something else will kick in and usually take care of the problem, because all pests usually have some sort of predation that keeps them in check.
Yep.
And so that probably during the restoration phase hasn't been quite established yet, so that balance will eventually equal out, and then the problem will solve itself.
Right.
And that's one thing that I think is really fascinating with the whole process. So do you guys, do you want to try to take a stab at those 5 principles, see if you know what they are?
So, real quick, I think we have seen, because we saw it the other, when we were planting trees, more hawks than normal.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Oh, yeah.
means that there are more probably mice, more rabbits, and stuff like that in our area.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna have more hawks, and then once they get the rodents and everything back to a lower amount, that system will find its equilibrium.
Yeah.
So I think we've seen it. We haven't seen it in a super harmful way.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, in a negative way, and that's primarily because we don't have anything out there that
Right.
was growing in that other environment.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
So, okay. So this isn't technically, there's 4 or 5
There's 5.
context.
There's actually 6.
Yeah, it depends on what source you go to. Sometimes there's 7,
Yeah.
but for our purposes, it's 5, and this is coming from the books that we've read.
Yeah. Okay. There's 5 plus holistic context, and we'll get to that in it. So we'll just set that one aside.
Okay. Animal involvement, always something growing, diversity. Dang it. I feel like I had it. Diversity.
So I'll help you out a little bit, because there's a so one of the
We've
one
been
of the
talking
things
about one of them for a while.
Yeah, that's been helping me is Green Cover, which is a company that we get our seed from for our pasture seed and cover crops and those kinds of things. And I am so impressed with this company. They're not sponsors, but I'm going to plug them anyway, because they're faith-based, and they're absolutely phenomenal in terms of what they provide.
If they want to be a sponsor, they can contact us.
Yeah, absolutely. But we've been working with them, and they have a smart mix calculator. But among many things they do, they have webinars and all that stuff. Is they publish a yearly magazine, and in that magazine, they have, it's just, I read it cover to cover. It's so good. But they discuss the 6 principles, including holistic context in there. And the way they have it captured really has helped me. And so number 1 is to keep your ground covered. And we'll talk about each one of these, but keep your ground covered, number 1. Then there's 3 M's. Maximize diversity. So that's maximizing the different kinds of plants that you're putting in the ground. You want to minimize breaking up the soil. And you want to maintain roots, maintain root growth all the time, all during the year. And then the 5th one is support livestock integration. Now, those 5 principles only make sense. They're not the end itself.
Right.
They're the means to the end. And the means to the end, and the end, you can think about it in different ways. But you're wanting to get this soil ecosystem moving the way it should, acting the way it should, in balance with all the fungi and the microbes and the bacteria and the organic matter, and all that stuff is happening. But to what end? So you have a wonderful soil out there that can grow anything. So what? Well, that's where holistic context comes in. And that's what I love about that, though that's not a principle in terms of regenerating the soil itself. It's the reason for why the soil needs to be regenerated. And so we'll get into, I think we'll get into that in just a few minutes about what is holistic context. But anyway, that's the way I remember those principles.
Right. Did you Did you say avoid chemicals? Was that one of your principles?
It's not one of them.
Your list is different than mine.
Yeah, so go ahead. What do you have?
I think it combined two things that you said there. So one was minimum soil disruption,
Yep.
constant soil coverage, and this one includes keeping living plants or living roots all year long. So I think that combined two there. And then crop diversity was the third one. Avoid chemicals was the fourth one. And then planned grazing with livestock was the fifth one.
Yeah, so they combined two and added one. And what's the source for that one? Do you know offhand? What's the source for that one?
I believe it was the books that we read.
Yeah. I wonder which one of those books, but okay.
I don't remember.
Yeah, and when we say the books that we've read, we're talking about Gabe Brown has a book, but Dirt Soil.
Yeah.
Then we've got Regenerative Agriculture,
Restoration Agriculture.
Restoration Agriculture by Mark Shepard.
And then there's a plethora of books by Joel Salatin.
Right,
And Alan Savory's.
and then Alan Savory, Holistic Management, which I think is the Bible to this whole thing.
Right. Which is where we got our blueprint for our context.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I think other than the fact that I didn't mention in my principles this whole idea of not using, would you say not using chemicals? Yeah,
No synthetic fertilizers and pesticides.
right, which we are practicing. So we've tried to put all of that into practice. So maybe we ought to take a few moments and at least explain what each of those mean so that folks have a better understanding of that.
Yeah. We'll go by one.
Yeah.
So the first one, minimum soil disruption. So you want to avoid plowing or tilling, and you want to leave the soil structure intact so that microbes, worms, and roots stay healthy and thrive. So in other words, you want to just avoid running over with the tractor as much as possible, and that's doing a number of things. You're compacting the soil, and you want to leave it nice and aerated, and you don't want to disrupt the life that's in the soil, and just kind of leave it as intact as possible.
Yeah. A lot of people, and me included, think it's necessary to till the soil to aerate it. And how wrong, I think that's wrong. I think that is a wrong way of looking at it. And that's what this is really getting at, is the whole idea of not disrupting your soil. So, a lot of industrial agriculture uses no-till as an approach. And the people, when we used to farm the 17 acres on this property, they would use that on occasion, depending on what they were going to plant, but they would do no-till. And so they were trying to minimize disruption of the soil, not to the degree that we have gotten to. But then when we were planting our trees, I remember you were talking about the plow pan. And let me describe what that is. So basically, if over years and years and years of using a plow to prepare your soil, what happens in the plow only goes down 6 to 8 inches. And so anything below that tends to harden. And when that hardens, especially around here with the clay loam soil that we have, water doesn't penetrate through that very well. And it becomes like a pan. So people call it a clay pan or plow pan. And that was very evident on this farm. So what we would do is I borrowed a subsoiler, which is an implement that goes on the back of the tractor that has about a 24-foot single spike that goes into the soil. And so it functions in such a way that you put it on the back of your tractor and it digs right into your soil and it breaks up that plow pan.
Right.
And so that's what we would do to generate the kind of breakup of the soil so that you can get water infiltration.
So you're just digging deeper into the ground, basically?
Digging deeper into the ground. And so that's what we would do, and to try to prepare our ground after it was a corn and soybean operation. So again, it's just the opposite of what this principle is trying to help us understand. But again, I'm trying to articulate this whole idea of it's a complete mind shift.
Right.
You have to change your perspective and your thinking when you're applying these principles. Otherwise, they don't make sense, or they go against common sense that we have learned over the years in terms of, like I just said, thinking if you plow up your ground, you're going to infiltrate air and water, and it's so much easier to get in there. It's all healthy. That's a good thing.
Right.
Turns out it's not quite so good.
Yeah, and that's really, I would imagine that's really hard to do, to have that mindset shift when you're a career-based farmer. And, it's easy for Kevin and me to do it because we're brand new to this. So we're basically learning farming through regenerative practices. But essentially it's like if you go through your whole career and you've learned, you have all those years of experience that you've learned, and then suddenly you have to relearn everything. It's not, it's not something you kind of lean towards doing.
Right. And it costs money.
Oh, it costs a lot of money, and we'll get into that too.
Yeah, but it's not like you could just flip the switch. I don't think we're ignorant enough or naive enough to think that you can just do this, because you just can't. And you've got to think through it and really weigh your options.
Right. So,
all right. So that was the first one.
Okay, so the second one, constant soil coverage. You're keeping the soil covered with living plants like cover crops at all times. Prevents erosion, holds moisture retention, and helps feed soil life. So in other words, we use cover crops during the process of restoration, and we're going to keep that last seed of cover crop, which is a perennial mix, so that'll just be there all the time. We won't have to keep terminating it during the restoration phase. But we also use, there's a cover crop on all of the fields and the Christmas trees too, with the grass and things like that. So everything is nice and covered at all times.
Right. Yeah, you don't want bare soil. Because your soil, we've got some bare spots out there, and I'm always amazed in the springtime how quickly something will start growing on that soil.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because by the good Lord in His creation, He expects it to be covered. And why? It protects the roots. It prevents the soil from heating up. It helps retain water. All that kind of good stuff is so necessary for the soil.
Yeah, and the moisture retention is a big one too, because I don't know if it needs to be explained, but if you have the soil constantly covered by something living, then it's, when we have droughts like we're going through right now, then less moisture is going to evaporate from the ground. It'll hold that moisture, and you'll be able to survive a drought longer than if you didn't have that soil covered.
Right. And I think it's interesting from a microscopic point of view when you think about rain, those drops as they come down and they hit the soil and they break it up. Yeah,
it's a little bomb.
It's exactly. If you actually were to watch it in slow motion, it's like a little bomb, and of course it's going to pick up any of the fine soil particles, and they're just going to run right off, because it's not able to soak into the soil.
Right.
And so, because it's dry, usually the soil is super dry, and it just is not in a position where it can absorb soil. Having a constant cover over that soil allows that penetration so much better.
So another important thing when we talk about that is like having living roots in the ground and everything like that, because we talked about the plow pan, clay pan, is having a variety of different roots allows deeper roots to break up that clay pan, GRUB pan, and to be able to get water deeper into the soil, so you can withstand that drought.
Yeah, was it Water for Any Farm is another book that, I think that was a Mark Shepard book that explains it he has a story in the beginning and explains that I'm loose on a lot of these details, but he took a farm that had basically no topsoil, and there's immediate bedrock. And so what he did was he planted a certain mix of cover crop that included asparagus, I think, that had tap roots that was able to literally break up that clay pan, or that plow pan rather. Now I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And some of that bedrock, and was able to start building topsoil.
Yeah. Well, I'll share a story with you guys. that when I was several years ago, as I was getting ready to plant one of our fields, the guy that had the subsoiler that I was borrowing, I wasn't able to use those. I was going to go and I was going to buy one.
Yeah.
And so I was looking, and I was talking to a farmer, one of my farmer, the guy that farmed our land. And he said, "Why don't you just go old school?" I said, "Okay, what does that mean?" He says, don't take a subsoiler out there. Actually, I was thinking about, it was the next field we were going to do after field 6. And so I wanted to start preparing that. And he said, all you need to do is go out there and plant some alfalfa and plant some rye. Okay, so I bit. All right, why alfalfa and why rye? Because of their very deep root systems. And what it does is it penetrates the clay pan, or the plow pan rather, it penetrates that, and the roots are pretty good size in it. And he says they'll go down 12 feet. And it's really good for the soil anyway. And so he said, old school, that's the way farmers used to do. They never had these big enough implements or tractors to pull these implements like they do today. So they would plant that, let it naturally die off, and then the root systems would die off as well.
Mhm.
And then that creates
That's your aeration.
your air pockets and allows water to penetrate into your soil.
And it also decomposes, which adds more, food for other microbial life.
Right.
Yep.
And then what that's also doing is that this is getting into the mix and why you need a diversity, but it's like you're saying, it's pulling those nutrients that are way down there that otherwise corn and soybean that have very shallow root systems,
Yep.
they can't get. So you're pulling those nutrients up through the soil for them to access. And so very interesting approach.
That wasn't
Same
that
idea.
long ago. That was not that long ago.
No.
Because that.
But that's what we've been doing, because our
Right.
cover crop that we've been planting is full of rye and full of alfalfa and many other
Yeah.
good, like your radishes and things like that. Yeah, to bust open that soil.
I wish there was a way that we could see what's growing underground, because I think our first year that we put the cover crop in field 7, I think it was a winter. Was it a winter mix?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
So
that was our
over
first-
winter, it looked like grass. It was only 5 inches above the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But what I learned anyway at some point was that there's a whole root system that's probably
Correct.
6 feet long.
Yep.
That we don't see. So there's a whole growth system underground that we just never see.
Right.
And that's really what's doing all the work for the most part.
That's right. That's stuff we can't see underground.
So that brings us to the third one, which is crop diversity. So you're growing many different plants together, polycultures, instead of one crop. And this mimics nature. It allows a diverse ecosystem to hold checks and balances, which automatically reduces and controls pests and diseases. So there's a lot of benefits there.
Yeah, and so when they say a diversity, what are they talking about? So we're talking about grasses, a wide variety of grasses. We're talking about legumes, so that you can, legumes, most people know that will put nitrogen back into the soil. You're talking about forbs that are so super healthy to have out there, and it's escaping me with the fourth. Brassicas. Brassicas is as the fourth, and those are groupings. Those are groupings of different plants, and we have several species in all 4 of those groups for each of our cover crops for winter and summer.
And we planned that out very methodically. We actually didn't do anything. It was all, that's another benefit of green cover, right?
Right,
So
green cover.
we worked with them, and then
Yeah. So they've got this fascinating smart mix calculator that for your particular area by zip code and by the amount of rainfall, and then you can put into this smart mix calculator, what are your objectives? What are you trying to do?
What's your
What are the
context?
goals? In that situation, that's exactly right. What are you trying to achieve? You put those in, and this calculator will automatically provide not only what the mix should be, but also it ranks them. This is excellent. This is an excellent for what you need. This is rated excellent. Some's rated good. Some's rated marginal. That kinds of things. But it gives you, and then it tells you how much. It tells you, so all that is automatically calculated for you. But then here's what I find is the wonderful thing is you can go through that and you can adjust it as you wish, if you want to do more of this particular seed, that kind of thing. But then when you're ready to order, they have a salesman contacts you and goes over the whole thing with you. And I tell you, that was so beneficial to me because I was new into this whole thing. So Nathan Choate is his name. Nathan got on the phone with me and we spent at least an hour going over, okay, exactly what are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do that? He wanted to understand what we were trying to get done. And then he would make suggestions and he would adjust because he saw what I had with the Smart Mix calculator came up with. And then he would he'd make adjustments. Well, you need to add a little bit more of this, and here's the reason why, and take some of this away, here's the reason, all that kind of good stuff. And just held my hand through the whole process and came up with a really good mix. And we've done that every year for both winter and summer for the past 3 years. And we've got I think the soil is really looking good out there.
Well, far better than it did 2.5, 3 years ago.
Oh yeah, yeah. So we're 3 years into that cover crop thing, and now we have just this April, just a couple weeks ago actually, we planted our perennial pasture seed, and so we won't need to do a cover crop anymore. That'll now take, and that was a very large diversity of different seeds that are going in, covering all 4 of those categories that I was talking about.
I can't wait to see that pop up.
Oh yeah, if we get some rain. Yep.
All right, and then number 4, avoid chemicals, no synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. Let natural biology and diversity do the work for fertility and pest control.
Yeah, here on this farm, we went cold turkey. I mean, just stopped.
But you also didn't use, technically you used some chemicals before we made the transition, but you were very, very light on,
very light on
the usage.
Right. But we stopped back in 2023. I quit putting any fertilizers on, and absolutely no chemicals whatsoever. And I've seen 0 issues. Very happy. They don't recommend you go cold turkey on that kind of thing. They say slowly work that out. But anyway, that's what we did. Because I was spending thousands of dollars. There was one chemical, I won't say the name of it, but it was $1,000 a gallon.
That's insane.
For that chemical. Yeah, and then the fertilizer. When we first moved here, we were paying $200 a ton. And then, of course, ethanol kicked in pretty strongly, and that was in 2006. By 2012, we were paying upwards of $800 a ton for fertilizer. I don't know what it is now.
I'm sure it's way more now.
Yeah, and that was basically urea and different kinds of potassium and of course nitrogen and all that kind of good stuff, phosphorus. But now we don't have to deal with any of that. It's a good thing.
I wonder, I bet some of the reason that we haven't seen a drastic change is you were running minimal. You weren't running the suggested amount.
Oh yeah.
If you were running
only half or a quarter of what. But one thing, and you and I think we've noticed this out there in Field 7, our regenerative field, is the amount of insects that are out there compared to what it was.
Right.
Oh, and that first year, they jumped 2 or 3-fold.
Yeah.
And these are, your beneficial insects, all that kind of good stuff. And we're talking about grasshoppers and butterflies and spiders, all kinds of, but the insect world needs to be there.
Right.
And so it was very evident that was happening. And the bird population way spiked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I think it was the second year, I noticed a tremendous amount of earthworms in the soil that I didn't see before.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well, that was the first thing Nathan asked me this year. Are you seeing earthworms in the soil?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So the fifth and final one is planned grazing. Move livestock in planned rotations to graze briefly, then allowing periods of rest. This mimics wild herds, fertilizes soil through manure, and stimulates plant growth without overgrazing. And that is something that we're currently incorporating with our chickens, but we plan to incorporate cattle out there once everything has been fully established and restored.
Yep.
So that's part of one of our next phase that we're moving towards. Yeah. So we don't have a lot of experience in that principle yet.
Not yet. But I mean, yeah, we've certainly read a lot about it.
Some of us more than others.
Yeah. I read a lot about it. Yeah, trying to understand, what cattle breed is the best, and and what they're going to need, and all that kind of good stuff. Is all part of making sure that we do our homework up front as best we can.
Well, yeah. Compared to the chickens, it's a much steeper entry fee.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I did want to talk about the holistic context for a moment, if we could. Yeah. And so I'm going to reference this book, and this is the 3rd edition, called Holistic Management: A Common Sense Revolution to Restore Our Environment. So this is by Alan Savory, and this book, I consider it the Bible for regenerative agriculture. But when he wrote this, Alan Savory, he's out of Africa. It's written from a world perspective,
Right.
not a agricultural farming perspective, hence the subtitle, A Common Sense Revolution to Restore Our Environment. But it does have in it a very detailed description of each of these different principles that we just got through talking about.
Yeah.
But one of the things I love about what Alan Savory has done is he helped at least me understand why it was so important that we had a proper context. What are we trying to do, and why are we trying to do it? And so in his book, he talks a great deal about what that is. And so I brought ours. So this is what the 3 of us and my wife Trudy, this is what we worked out back in January of 2024. And I won't read it. I mean, I think that's probably too much for what we're trying to do right now, but it does include a small paragraph, a description, and then a statement of purpose, and then several bullets on quality of life and future resource base. But I loved what it did was it forced us to think through what our context is, so that when we put these principles into practice, this allows us to see where are we headed, where do we want to go. So as we make course corrections on our farm, we're always asking ourselves the question, is this going to result in us meeting our holistic context?
Right.
And the other thing that this book did, was it helped to frame, it gave some other guideposts in terms of making decisions, critical decisions on your farm, like purchasing a piece of equipment or purchasing some land or whatever the case may be. And it asks questions that you want to think through before you start moving in that direction. And it's been quite helpful for us.
We've used it quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit. And so, I can't say enough about this book, and I highly recommend it for people to consider and to really look at that holistic context piece.
So yeah, it's Holistic Management. This is the 3rd edition, A Common Sense Revolution to Restore Our Environment, and it's by Alan Savory. It is a essential book, I think, but it's also probably one of the most boring and dry audiobooks that I've had to, it took me, I think, 6 months to get through that book, but it's
pretty dense.
It's very dense, and you're in for a ride if you decide to read that.
That's one of the ones that I need to listen to probably 2 or 3 more times before.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
It's
I
a lot
didn't
to take
listen
in.
to this on an audio because I knew that it had a lot in it. And so having the book and reading the book is a lot different than listening to it.
Right.
Yeah, I do have a copy of it, and I read, I think, the first chapter or so, and it is, I think, a little bit better than listening to the audiobook. But I think, I mean, I need to do it both ways because there's benefits to reading and listening.
Right.
So I want to real quick get through one more thing, which I want to talk about the problems with regenerative agriculture, because I feel like if we skip that part, we're not going to do it justice.
Absolutely. Fair enough.
And there are some downsides or some struggles that you are going to have to deal with when using this method. And I don't think this is a complete list, but it is a list that I was able to come up with in time for this. So for what that's worth, the upfront cost for seeds and the infrastructure to get started and to maintain it is definitely a hurdle. We're a pretty small farm operation, and so all of the costs that go into those seeds and that infrastructure comes out of pocket for us. So that is certainly something to consider, and there's a lot of planning in that phase as well.
Could I add some detail to that?
Yeah.
Just so people have more context there. So for example, our 17 acres that we have out here, our cover crop cost for the seed alone was between $1,000 and $1,100
Each time.
each time. So just to give you a sense of, 17 acres, $1,100. So if you've got 100 acres, do the math, that kind of thing. So that was one thing. But then we didn't have any equipment other than a 27 horsepower tractor. And so I wanted to put it down properly, the right way. So we got a conservation seeder. It's a 5-foot wide conservation seeder that cost about $7,000, 74.
And it was very hard to find too.
Exactly.
We got really lucky on actually finding one, but that's something else to consider.
Well, I wanted to rent. I mean, that would be the smarter thing to do, but we couldn't find it. But then the other thing was, how do you terminate your cover crops so that you can plant your next cover crop? And so we ended up, there's many ways that you can do that. But the way we chose was to use a roller crimper. And so there was a cost to that. That was another $4,000 to purchase that roller crimper. And it's a 5-foot wide roller crimper. And then we needed another tractor anyway, so we ended up getting another tractor. And this was a larger one. It's a 47 horsepower, which can handle both the roller crimper and the seeder at the same time. But then that was, another $24,000 for the tractor. So just know that there are costs there. And there is an argument that says, well, wait a minute, you don't need all that equipment. And they're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, that was before reading Alan Savory and some of the key questions. Some of it we decided to go with for reasons that we felt were right.
Yeah, and
anyway, that's what
another approach that people can take is that if there's other farmers, you can reach out to them and like rent their equipment, because some people, a lot of farmers are interconnected, and so they'll do like an equipment sharing thing,
Right.
And so that can be another option too. With that, there is also a substantial lack of income during the restoration phase. So while our field 7 is being restored, it's completely out of operation, and it has to be for the whole entire duration. So that, if you think about these large scale farms and how they would have to go through the same phase, they're going to have to go years without any kind of income, and that's going to be orders of magnitude more difficult.
Yeah. If you remember when we went out to Virginia, there was a pig farm that we went to visit, and we were asking that question about, because they did the same thing. They went from a monoculture crop, and they fallowed the land for 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah.
And then went right into a pasture situation.
Yep.
And why did they do that? Because they couldn't afford to go longer than a year without having income.
Right. Because we're looking at 7-8 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But our income, and we're not dependent on that.
Right.
So that gives us an advantage that others, I mean, that's a great point, that others don't have. And we recognize that.
Yeah.
And you're also going to have lower yields in those early transition years too, which we're definitely going to experience when these chestnuts become ready. It's going to take a while for them to kick off, but that's also to our own benefit because we're new to the chestnut operation anyway. So we want that to kind of have a slow start so that we can adapt to it. And it's also, so there is a counter to this which is that regenerative polycultures they have layered canopies, so you can actually, let me step back. There's a big pushback. I think the most common pushback against regenerative agriculture is that we live in a nation of 300 plus million people, and you can't feed 300 plus million people with regenerative agriculture. And that's why we have conventional agriculture. But there may be some truth to that. Again, I'm kind of ignorant to this because I'm so new to it. However, the counter to that argument is that there's those layered canopies when it comes, so if you have an acre, you technically have 5 times more production surface area in that 1 acre with diverse monocropping or diverse regenerative cropping compared to a monoculture. So if you had a single row of corn on 1 acre, that's one thing. But if you had on that same acre, you could have a canopy, a 3-dimensional canopy of trees and vines growing on those trees. In fact, that's what we're trying to, it's one thing we're going to attempt to do we have the chestnuts that are growing, and theoretically we might try incorporating grapevines that'll grow around those chestnut trees, and we can harvest those at the same time. So that's essentially 2 crops on 1 plot of land that you can't do with a monoculture. And then you can actually compile those even a lot more, especially when you start to incorporate livestock and chicken and things like that. Right. So you can have all these things on 1 plot of land that you just can't do with a monocrop method.
And you can alley crop. So like a perennial that is really good for alley cropping is asparagus. And you can put a couple of rows in between the trees of asparagus. And so that again is adding another layer that you can do. We've talked about in between the trees planting some pawpaws, which is a local wonderful fruit tree. And other kinds of things, apples perhaps, or those. So you just have to be creative in how you take advantage of your point. And that is, it's not just 2-dimensional. You've got that 3rd dimension of space that you can use. And so our primary story, our canopy, is going to be the chestnuts. But underneath that, there are a number of different kinds of perennial plants and bushes and crops that can grow to make money.
Mm-hmm. You also have the risk of weeds and pests that can sprout up during those transitional phases, which we've already talked about.
But let me. There is a really good point in one of the books that I was reading recently on for cows. Weeds to me, I've really changed my definition of weeds. Weeds to you and me may be an unwanted plant in an area that it is not doing any good.
Dandelions.
To a cow or a beef cattle, weeds can be a wonderful source of nutrition for them, and they'll eat it right up, depending on what it is. It's also a great indicator of deficiencies in your soil. Certain kinds of weeds will grow when there's a certain deficiency or when there's an overabundance of a particular kind of nutrient. But the cattle will self-select that what they would have eaten. So Joel Salatin, in one of his books, salad bar beef, is that what it's called?
For sure. Yep, the first bite method.
Yeah. Well, the whole idea is, to a cow, no matter what you have out there, it's a salad bar for them. And so, weeds take on a different perspective
Yeah.
when you think about it from a cattle point of view.
Yeah, and that's actually another con to regenerative is that you kind of have to. There's a learning curve, and I would say a steep learning curve to it,
Yeah.
because on one hand, I mean, depending on who you are, if you're coming at this from as an experienced traditional farmer, then you're going to have to relearn a lot of things. I'm sure there's a lot of knowledge overlap, but you're probably like being able to read the land and understand those signs. Like you said, if you have, certain weeds popping up, you can probably use that as an indicator to know about the certain deficiencies or nutrient value of your soil. But there's obviously, like, you have to know what that is. Like, you may recognize the sign, but you don't know actually what the technicalities behind it actually mean.
Yeah.
And so you have to learn about that, which is a whole thing. And there's a lot of
it is just self-education.
Yeah.
Because you don't find a lot of this being taught, or at least right now, in higher education. And I think that's a con.
Yeah, it's certainly something to consider, as well as scalability, because this is something we're probably going to have to deal with at some point, because your market access and your premiums are not always going to be guaranteed. You're not going to have the same access to grain mills or certain co-ops that you would otherwise, especially when we're trying to grow more niche crops like chestnuts.
Even, another con is the whole idea of policy at the federal and state level. Those policies are based oftentimes on, where the lobbyists are coming from. And so they of course are supporting big ag and a lot of the common ways that most 98.5% of all farms are using. So, I mean, naturally, policies should be supporting those kinds of things. But, each administration is different. Right now, we happen to have an administration in there where they are pro-regenerative agriculture ideas. And I think that's good for America. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty much all I got, other than I had a few notes about the nutritional aspect of it, which I think it's important. I find that part of it to be really interesting, because regenerative foods are significantly more nutrient dense than foods that you get otherwise. And it's something that's not talked a lot about, and I think there's a lot of research that's probably still needs to be done around that. But it's important to know that this system of growing food does improve the health and the value and the nutritional content of that food, which is something that's just being depleted. It's all these nutrients are being depleted in the soil itself, and therefore the food that grows on that land and on that soil is also going to get depleted as well. So it's for everyone's health benefits. When you're talking about 400% higher levels of vitamin C, E, and K, and then minerals like zinc, magnesium, and calcium, all the antioxidants and stuff, it's up to 400% higher with regeneratively grown food compared to conventionally grown food, which is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, that's so important. That is baked into our holistic context. And maybe I'm going to read the smallest section of this is our statement of purpose, because that gets to the very point you have here. So what ours says, our statement of purpose for our holistic context, is to ensure a God-centered farm managed regeneratively and sustainably to provide a healthy income stream sufficient to support multiple families by producing a wide variety of perennial, fresh, and marketable nutrient-dense products now and well into the future for multiple generations. That's our purpose statement. That's what we're all about. And that gets to that whole idea of nutrient density. And look at our eggs.
Phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
Delicious.
Yeah, we do all of our marketing for our eggs, and that's one thing I try to emphasize is the nutritional value and the benefits that you get. There's a hefty price associated with our eggs, but you're getting a lot there that I think most people don't even realize that they're getting.
Yeah. Well, I love this idea that Joel Salatin would make in his book. What's the name of that one?
Pasture poultry profit.
Profits, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So what he would do is he would crack one of his eggs into a glass bowl and then crack a regular store-bought egg, and just looking at the difference. I've done that, and looking at the difference of our eggs and how bright orange and beautiful the clarity of the whites and
Yeah, the
everything.
yolk or the whites.
The whites, it's so different, and it's evident right in front of you.
Right, versus the bright yellow.
Oh yeah, that bright yellow to orange is just packed with nutrients. But that's what it's all about, and that's what we're doing, and we're seeing evidence of it, and we're trying to share that with others.
Yeah. I mean, as a colorblind person, the thing that sticks out to me the most when I look at the two different eggs is the viscosity of those egg whites. There's so much, like that membrane is a lot thicker
Right.
with our eggs. Because I was making bread earlier today, and I put one in the bread maker, and as it started spinning, usually like before it would just like immediately, like anytime there's even just the gravity would break it open and the egg yolk would spill out everywhere, but this one stayed intact perfectly. And then as it was spinning, I had to like physically take a sharp knife and break it up because it wasn't working with the machine. But
Yeah.
that's a big difference.
Yeah, it's all healthy. Good.
Anything else you want to add?
I think that's a pretty good overview. I mean, we didn't get into any great detail, but it is a pretty good overview of what we're trying to do. How are we using this on our farm? We're trying to incorporate each of those principles. We're using the holistic context, and we're reading a ton.
Right. I think it's also important to note that it's not this one day we're doing this, next day we're solely regenerative. It is a process.
Well, I look at it as a way of life. I mean, it is a complete mind shift, and I don't think about it as regenerative anymore. That this is our practice.
Right. But we can't, in certain aspects of it, we haven't been able to just go from how we used to do it to fully regenerative in certain aspects. And I think the biggest one is livestock. That's where we see it the most. Like chemicals and everything, like you said, we went cold turkey. With livestock, it has been a slower integration to where we want it to be eventually.
Yeah. Why has it been a slower integration? Part of it is because we don't have the market.
We don't have the market.
And without the market, then we're spinning our wheels.
Right.
There's not only do we not have the market, but we're also brand new to the market, so we haven't penetrated the market. Yeah, we have to establish ourselves in the market that we don't even know if it exists yet. So there's it's a twofold problem that we're dealing with.
Well, threefold, because financial.
Yeah, limited budget. That's true.
But I think the fact that we're trying, I mean, I think the most obvious challenge we have right now is we want to get into meat birds.
Right.
But we don't have a demand. We don't have a pull at this point for meat birds. And so we got to figure out, and so we don't want to be going out and ordering a bunch of chicks and growing a bunch of chicks into meat birds only to not be able to sell them.
Right.
See, and that's this issue of market in my mind, is figuring out how to penetrate that market in such a way that we can create a demand, which allows us to then accurately predict what it is we're going to need, so that we don't waste the limited resources that we have.
Yeah. I don't know. It's definitely been an experience.
Yep.
A good one. I'm trying to think which book it was, but they talked about it's shifting how you see everything. And in Green Cover, in the magazine there, they talked about what you just said, where it's not regenerative farming. Regenerative the thought process applies to all aspects of life, really.
Right.
It's about. Hi, Tom. I was wondering when that was going to happen.
We almost went the whole
I
podcast
know.
without interruption there.
So, but it's about giving more than you're taking.
Yeah.
Is one of the big things they talk about.
Yeah.
So you're giving more to the soil, more carbon, more.
Yeah, well, you're giving back as opposed to just take.
Yeah. Then you're taking from it.
Yep.
Which applies to all aspects of life.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's been a growing experience.
Sure. But a good one.
Yeah.
But a good one.
A great one.
Yeah. Moving in the right direction.
Yeah. So, but yeah, now that Tom's here, I think it's a good time to
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up.
Yeah.
All right, well, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe, like this video if you can. It really helps us, especially when it comes to the algorithm and getting us kind of established there. We are a pretty new channel, so any help would be greatly appreciated. And we'll see you guys in the next video, probably in 1 week.